Okay, so it sounds like we're going to get started. What I'm going to ask us to do before everybody gets too comfortable is this will involve you talking to somebody else next to you. I'm not going to ask anybody to role play. Let's just be very clear about the rules of engagement here. But you will need to turn to the person next to you. So if you don't have a person next to you to turn to, it looks like this middle row is good if you ladies in the middle combine, and then two. This row is good. You guys, whatever you guys want to do. And then maybe if you, ma'am, that you're standing, maybe, yes, if you two get together, then I think we're good right now, numbers-wise. Right? Did I do that, Matt? Two. Yes. Okay, good. So now that we'll all be assembled, thank you guys for moving up. I appreciate it. So what we're going to do is have a chance to learn a little bit about coaching, learn a little bit about each other, and mostly have a time to connect with each other and think about how can we do this as not like a one-off in a conference, but start to incorporate this into our day all the time. And so the work that we do with coaching at Mass General, first of all, my name is Kerri Palamara. I know I was introduced earlier, but it's a large room, so hello. And I'll be speaking later at the plenary. I work at Mass General, which is within the Harvard system, and we do a lot of coaching at Mass General of residents and faculty. And the idea, though, is that coaching is expensive, and it's hard to find a good coach. And so what we try to do is teach people to coach themselves and coach each other and just the way we converse on a daily basis. And so we're going to talk about that. And how we learned how to do all this was through the Institute of Coaching, as well as a few grants that allowed us to research it and share the work. And so our grant funders are on here. And so the other thing I want to point out is that in my slides, a lot of it says physicians, but this by no means is only for physicians. I didn't realize when I was making the slides how multidimensional and interprofessional this day is, and so I want to make sure that no one feels excluded by the word physicians, and really that's just people who happen to be in healthcare. And so I'll be very careful about making sure I'm true to that as I'm speaking, but I just want to make sure as you see that on the slides that no one feels like this doesn't apply to them. And the idea really behind a lot of this is that it's kind of lonely coming to work, despite the fact that we work in such busy systems. You know, if you think about it during your day, in my office, my practice, I'm in primary care, we just built this like brand new fancy practice, and it's all team-based, and there's pods where the teams are, but it's almost so carefully laid out that I could go a whole clinic session and only talk to my MA, which is crazy because there's over 20 docs, there's 5 NPs, there's however many, there's probably 12 MAs, there's residents, there's front desk people, there's all different people, but I don't actually get to talk to any of them unless I actually pick myself up and walk down the hall and choose to talk to somebody, which is absolutely bananas. And then we're in elevators or we're walking around busy systems, and then we're all on our phones, and we don't actually connect with each other, which is just totally crazy. And so our lives are busy, and the workday is busy, and the way systems are, we could easily go through a whole day without talking to another person. And when we get busy, this actually gets worse. We bury ourselves deeper. We actually say like, oh my gosh, I have all these things to do. I should shut the door. God forbid someone might walk in. Or, let me just, instead of walking to go fill up my water bottle, let me just fire off 3 emails or refill 2 medicines or do something. And so we actually bury ourselves deeper the busier we get. But actually when we do that, when that loneliness starts to kick in, and we lose those social connections. Like we're social people. Even if you're quote unquote introverted or anything, we're still social beings as humans. And so this is really important. And actually you find that when you do a better job connecting, you're more engaged in the work that you're doing. You're more productive, believe it or not. So thinking about those busy days. You're more efficient, your teams work better. There's a lot of conversation that doesn't even need to happen because you converse all the time. And that you actually call out sick less often, I think because you feel more a part of something, and your burnout goes down. And so loneliness in the workplace and the stress related to loneliness is really starting to become a big part of this conversation about burnout and about well-being. And so I've now, since learning more about this and learning more about myself and how I work best, have now taken to, when I feel really stressed out and busy, I stop and say, let me go find one person to talk to. And I'll just walk in and say, can I just talk for 2 minutes? I need to talk to a human. And usually someone's like, oh, thank goodness, me too. And I actually find when I go back to my desk, I'm like laser focused because I got that little boost from it. So we're going to get a chance to hopefully do that with each other today. So first I want to talk a little bit about coaching and how that layers into all of this. The sad or easy or interesting thing about coaching is that it's really just a nice way to talk to another person. And so what's sad is that that isn't just how we talk to each other. And really at the core of it is that we are so busy, ready to talk or ready to do something else that we stop really listening, we stop really hearing. And that art of two-way dialogue has changed. And so that's, I think, why coaching has become so valuable in healthcare. So the idea of coaching, I've also learned that definitions are very important, and I'll share a little bit about that in the plenary. But the idea of coaching, as I refer to it, is actually comes from the literal definition of a stagecoach, a vehicle that takes someone from where they are, as defined by them, to where they want to be, as defined by them. And that you as the coach are that vehicle. You're that space where that journey happens. You're not the driver. You're not the navigator. It's not your job to know how they're going to get there. It's not their job to help them get. It's not your job to help them get there. Your job is to provide the space for them to consider their journey, reflect on their journey, and figure out what that looks like for them, and help them figure out the steps forward. And so we're not fixing people. It's actually a very liberating type of conversation because you have no job but to just be that space, be that vehicle. And it's really helping people to be the best versions of themselves. And so in order to do that, we really need to practice a few basic skills. But understanding there's one major principle about coaching that really, I think, helps change the way we think, and I'll talk a little bit about that after we do that. But that's the positive psychology part of the coaching work that we do, which is taking a moment to unpackage our good experiences. Well, first of all, just recognize them at all, unpackage them, re-experience them, and think about what it is that was our role in that, and what is it that we want to carry forward to other experiences. So what I'm going to have you guys do right now is start to practice that. So I'm going to have you turn to the person next to you and have you share a story, something good that happened over the last week. It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be something in between. The only rules are that it has to be true, it has to have really happened to you, and it had to make you feel good. And your goal, as when you are the person sharing, is that you really want the coach, the person listening, to practice listening, truly listening. So you got to give them some stuff to listen to. So I'm going to make you talk for 2 whole minutes about yourself to another person. Okay, all of you are probably like, oh gosh, but it goes really fast actually. And I'm going to have you really share that story. Share, and I can participate. I think we have one extra person, so I'm happy to participate. I can come over. And so, not extra person, we have an odd number of people. So what you're going to do is you're going to share all about that story, really unpackage it, the sights, the sounds, the tastes, the smells, help them transport themselves into your story. And so when you're the coach, your only job is to listen. In fact, I don't want you to talk at all. No, like, oh my gosh, that's so nice. Or like, oh, me too. None of that. Just listen. That is your only job. And really listen. Get inside their story. Whatever else you have going on, whatever messages you're supposed to be answering or things about your life you're supposed to be thinking about, put them aside for 2 minutes and just truly listen. All right? So I'm going to give us 2 minutes each. And I will turn off the microphone for my partner. And then I'll tell you when it's time to switch, and then we'll regroup. Sound good? So, how did that feel? Tell me what felt great about it.
Someone is giving me time. That's for me and listening, because that's like very hard thing, like in this busy world, like someone listening to you without any interruption, and like talking about your some good achievement of having something good in the last week makes me feel great right now, like, you know, because since the morning we're talking about like stress and all that.
It's a good follow-up to that.
And I felt like maybe I'm burned out, like, you know, you're putting yourself, where are you?
Good, good. Do other people agree with that? I see lots of nods. So I want to highlight something that you said, to have someone listen to me. Did anybody feel like, do people feel like no one listens or gives you time to talk without interrupting you? Yeah. And how did it feel then to be the listener and not interrupt or talk? Was that hard?
Yeah, it was hard. I think it's hard sometimes just like, I didn't find myself wanting to interrupt, but I found myself wanting to affirm.
Yes.
And even being quiet and not saying, oh, I see, or that's wonderful, it's hard to not speak.
It is. But what happened when, as you didn't interrupt? What did you do? You kept talking. Yes. We often, even when we have good intentions of affirming or being empathic, we as soon as someone else starts talking, we're so used to being interrupted that we just stop. And that when we say nothing, we start to deepen, dig a little deeper, peel a few layers off of what we're talking about. Now, with that last piece in mind, how many of you told a story that you haven't told anybody else? That's a lot of you. How many of you told it differently than you've told anybody else? So most of us have either shared a great story that happened over the last week with no one, or we barely shared it at all. Mine was about a meeting that went really well. And that's how I described it when someone's like, oh, how was your day? Oh, I had a good meeting. That was it. But I just talked for 2 minutes about what was so great about that. So we either don't tell it or we actually rob ourselves. And now we've learned, how did it feel to listen to the story, to just be a witness to it? It was nice. What was nice about it?
Kind of seeing things from someone else's perspective and then learning from that and taking ideas from like, well, that's a good idea. And, or seeing it that way is really interesting. I want to try seeing it that way as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So yes, so it feels good to hear it. It feels good to share it. But we don't often do that. Yet, I bet, how many of you have complained to a colleague in the last week about something? So, right? So I could see Roberta in the hallway and be like, here you go, Roberta. Here's my crap. It's all yours now. But I won't tell you about a great meeting or my kid's birthday party or a vacation or anything that feels good. I'll just give you the stuff that doesn't. And when we share the stuff that doesn't, that actually doesn't do anything for us. And it certainly doesn't do anything to the recipient who's like, whoa, like it felt like you felt in the last talk of like, oh, wow, yeah, that is really bad. I feel bad. And actually, there's some really great data that talks about sharing positive stories or reliving positive experiences, that it helps to make us more mentally flexible, more creative, and more open to new ideas. So I now start most meetings, or one-on-one or large group, with just this. Give me a good story. Or turn to the person next to you and share a good story, because it changes how the rest of the meeting goes, particularly if you want people to brainstorm, if you want to share tough information and have people think about it more creatively, or if you just want to have a more dynamic meeting. Like, we all feel a little bit differently than we did when we walked in. And so that's actually how all coaching meetings start between people at MGH, is by sharing a good story, something that's been going on that they feel good about. And so we have an entire curriculum about coaching. There's certification courses that you can take. But at the end of the day, the core skills of coaching are listening, as you just practiced, reflecting, and actually reflecting like you're supposed to, and we'll talk about that, and asking powerful questions that help people figure out, remember back to that definition, figure out where they are and where they want to be and what that journey is going to look like for them. And so at the end of the day, if you remember nothing else, remember that listening, reflecting, and asking powerful questions. And we'll talk about how to do that. But the idea with coaching is that if they're doing most of the talking, you're probably doing a good job. You as the coach don't really have to do all that much. It's the environment that you create and the words that you choose when you have them. And so much of it is actually changing our curiosity from a curiosity for us to curiosity for them. And so when we're asking questions, we're not asking questions that we want to know the answers to. We're asking questions that they need to know the answers to. And so to give you a great example, I've coached people on like clinical efficiency before, having no idea what their practice is like, where they even work. Or I coached somebody about starting a business, and I still to this day have no idea about what the business is. Because the point is they know that information. And so what they need me for is to think about how do they work within their environment. And so me asking questions about that I need to know only actually stalls their forward progress. But me asking questions that they need to know the answers to really empowers them to move forward and helps them to find that growth edge. And so when I ask a question as a coach, I always think to myself, is this question for me or is this question for them? And I try to, if it's for me, I don't ask it. And every once in a while, there's like a, I just need to make sure we're on the same page here. So, I'll actually call that out and say, I just have one quick question that I need to know the answer to, but then we can move on. And that way, it stays really creative, it stays really productive and forward-thinking and keeps that energy moving. And the idea is that we all have a growth edge around whatever it is that we're working toward, wherever that journey is taking us. And the idea is to help them find it. And you can do this in minutes with somebody, which is really, really a cool thing. And so a huge part of this is how we listen. The majority of us listen as our chance to talk. I'm just going to listen to find the part where I get to talk and say what I want to say. And that is not, and so when we're doing that, we're not actually really taking it in. What is this person saying? What's behind their words? Where are their values? Where are their motivators? Where are those discrepancies that are really challenging for them? And so the idea is that we want to get to not just listening to pay attention, but really listening to understand, to be with them. And so that we can help them understand where they're going, where they are, how they want to get there. And so when we reflect, what I love about this particular picture is that you have no idea who's behind it. And so oftentimes in conversation, when we reflect, if I say, so Ashley, it sounds like this is what you're thinking. Now I'm going to ask you a question. So you never actually get to dive into, is that what I'm thinking? What or why? Yeah, that is what I'm thinking. And let me tell you why. So reflections are meant to bounce back at the person that you're making them towards. A real mirror doesn't keep talking when you're looking at it. It allows you to see it and adjust what you're doing based on that. And so when we reflect, the way I teach our coaches is to make a reflection and then shut up and let them keep talking. Because the idea is when you've listened and you reflect back what you've truly heard them say and then stop talking, they start to peel off more layers. Yeah, this is really important to me, and let me tell you why. It's important for this reason. It's important for that reason. I'm feeling challenged for this reason. This is what I'm working on. I'm trying to balance this, but it's really hard because I'm also trying to balance that. And then you make another reflection. And oftentimes they're simple. Like, it sounds like that's really hard. Well, yeah, it is really hard. Let me explain to you why it's really hard. Or maybe it's like literally exactly what they just said. It sounds like you're really struggling to balance these two things. But whatever it is, it validates it and helps them be heard, and then puts them back in that puts them in that driver's seat, keeps them in that driver's seat, and allows them to explore it more deeply for themselves. And so the majority of the conversations in coaching take a while before you've even asked a question, because you can do so much with the listening and the reflecting before you even ask a question. And the idea is not just to help people think about what's not working for them, but more importantly, think about what is. Because we're all really, really good at articulating our weaknesses, telling people what's not working, and we become nondescript and vague and kind of wishy-washy when asked about our strengths, when asked what's going well for us, because we tend to brush that all off as if it's like, well, everybody does this, right? Or like, yeah, this is good, but like, I'm just waiting for you to stop telling me the good things so that you can tell me the thing that isn't going well. And that we kind of brush off the stuff that's good and don't own it as unique parts of us. And so really helping people to hold on to the positive so that it sticks more like Velcro and doesn't just slide off of us like Teflon. And this doesn't mean that weaknesses should just slide. I mean, we need to own our weaknesses, but the idea is that we can go so much farther when we approach things from a place of what makes us feel good and what we're good at and what's working for us than just eliminating the stuff that isn't. So now that we're ready to practice some more, we're going to, was there a question? Oh, so now we're going to practice reflections. So what you're going to do is you're going to ask your coachee, which is the person that you're talking to, for a challenge that they're going through. Could be personal, could be professional. It could be like, I need to get my notes done, or I want to work out more, like literally anything. And you're going to ask them for something that they're working on or a challenge that they're experiencing, and let them talk about it for 2 whole minutes, during which time you will listen to them and not say anything and not interrupt. And you will be there and be present. And when you are listening, you're listening for what they're really hearing. You're listening to understand them. At the end of 2 minutes, I will interrupt us and say, now it's time to offer a reflection, in which then you'll have 30 seconds to offer a reflection, okay? And in those 30 seconds, keep it simple. After 30 seconds, I will interrupt you again, and then you let your coachee talk for another minute and see what happens after that reflection as they get to explore it even more. So 2 minutes of talking about a challenge or a stressor, 30 seconds for the coach to reflect and then get out of the way and be quiet, and then a minute for the coachee to keep talking, okay? And I'll guide us through this. Keep it simple is the best advice I can give you. All right, so I'm going to keep track of time, and I will interrupt us when it's 2 minutes, when it's time to offer the reflection. That, not to give advice. You want to, and that makes you a lovely person. So yes, so it's hard not to give advice. How hard was it not to ask any questions? Right? Because we want to know more. We want to know more. What happened after the reflection? Deeper. You heard more. It went deeper. You kind of got. Did you start to get a sense of like, oh, I get why this is going on? Yeah.
Like more emotional. I feel like the first part was more factual. Like here's the thing that's going on, and then after the reflection, it was like a little bit more emotion shared about the experience.
Right, almost like this gate is opened, and you're like, okay, now we can progress to the next level. And I think part of it, I would guess, is you were heard in that reflection. You feel heard, and you say, yes, and. As opposed to like, this is the part I just keep to myself and don't really get at. Did anybody struggle with this, aside from what we have already mentioned? Yeah?
To come up with a good reflection, just to be that was hard. Yeah, that was for me as well. Stressful. And I feel like I do a lot of counseling in my normal, like kind of counsel a decent amount. And it was, like,
Yeah, it is.
Like, it was like, oh no, this is reflection. It's reflection.
It is. What I would say is lower the bar for what you think a good reflection is, because as you pointed out, you just want the person to feel heard and let them keep talking. And so when you make the reflection complex, it's actually more about you than about the other person. And I'm not judging, and so what I have found is it sounds like, I hear this, and just keep it really simple. And the best part is you can be wrong. And sometimes if you're wrong, it's really helpful because it's like, no, it's not that, it's this. And you're like, oh, all right, tell me. And so being wrong can actually be very clarifying. So lower that bar and just remember to get out of the way after you do it. And this is it felt choppy, but I actually have to do that so that we do it the way reflections are meant to be done, which is challenging.
Reflecting, are you just trying to just rephrase what you think you heard? Is that a good way to approach it?
A lot of times it's rephrase. I wouldn't use rephrase because then that takes forever. So what I'm hearing you say is that you do this and then you do that and then you do this and you do that. Like yeah, that's basically what I just said. And that is almost more serving your purposes of I'm just trying to keep this organized in my brain, as opposed to what did you really hear them say? And so I gave an example of how I'm trying to get into more of a routine with my schedule, which has been kind of haphazard over the last few months, and that I would really just love to be like, Mondays are like this. And like, obviously that's like, there's going to be weeks that aren't, but like actually knowing what each day of the week would look like. And so my expert coach said, it sounds like you're really craving structure and routine. And that's like basically exactly what I said, but it's like, yes. And there's like a million reasons why. And that then allows me to focus on that as opposed to like all these other things I might be saying is like at the heart of, this is what's at the heart of what I just said. So once you've listened and reflected a bit, then that's when you have the opportunity to actually ask questions. And the way I think about it is that when you listen and then offer reflection, you go a little deeper. You listen, you offer reflection, you go a little deeper. Then on the table in front of you are the values, the motivators, the strengths, what's making them feel good, what's really hard about this. All those tools that they need to start to do anything with this is on the table. And so when you ask a question, then they really know what to do with it. But that means we also have to change the way we ask questions. So we in healthcare ask a lot of why questions. That makes us great in healthcare. Why aren't you taking your medicines? Why does your blood pressure look like this? Why are you always late for your appointments? Why is why are you in the hospital? And those make us really good at our job in healthcare, but that doesn't make us great coaches. Because when we ask why questions, the people we're asking them of get on the defensive. And it's actually very reality tethering and also past tethering. And so we think about like, what did we do to get us into this situation? Or why are we here? And also the why questions are for us to understand things more, not for them to understand it more. And so as coaches, the best questions that we can ask are what and how questions. And so what would it look like if this were going well? How might you ask for help? What might you say that could help get this conversation off on the right foot? And so thinking about the what and the how questions, they're future focused. They're thinking about the ideal state. They're thinking about almost as if like you're approaching this challenge as if you've already achieved it. What and how questions are also really good to bring us out of negative frameworks and into more like our fixed mindset, into more of a growth mindset. And so like I might have someone, like I was coaching someone and I was like listening and reflecting. I was like, I'm doing this. I'm practicing everything I teach about. And I'm like, where's this going? Like, this just sounds terrible. Like, this person's miserable. And I can't even actually pinpoint why. And I was just like, if you could wave your magic wand and make this all better, what would that look like? And a lot of times it just gives you permission to just get real generative and like really like ideal state and thinking like, well, I'd be able to do this and I'd be able to do that and I'd be able to do that. All right, so what's one thing that you could do to start moving towards that? Or another great what or how question is, if you had a friend going through the same thing, what advice would you give them? Because oftentimes we're like very direct with our friends, more so than we are with ourselves. Well, I would just tell them to do this. All right, so what would it look like if you were to do that? So what would it look like is probably how I start like 75% of my coaching questions. And how might you is another way I start a lot of them. And you want to think about empowering the path forward with your what and your how questions. And the what and the how questions are about them. It's about the questions that they need the answers to. And so when you layer this all together, and I don't think we're going to have time to practice this, but if we layer this all together, there's a model called the GROW model that encapsulates this really nicely, where you take someone who has a goal or a challenge or something that they're working towards, and you spend a lot of time thinking like, all right, so rather than most challenges were like, so this is what I want to do, but this is where I am. This is what the situation is. I have this isn't working, that's not working, and I have this thing in front of me. But we often don't spend some time in that goal space of saying like, what would that really look like if you were doing it? So my example of the schedule, like if I were doing that, what am I doing? What does it look like? What does my week look like? What am I asking for? What am I putting into place? What good habits am I using? Who and what are my resources? And really thinking about as if you've achieved it, as if you're already on the other side having done it. And now you're looking back and you say, all right, so where am I now? What's my reality? What are my obstacles? What are my resources? What's at play for me? And then what are my options? So how might I move towards where I am now to where I want to be? And my favorite question when I'm in the options part of this is, what else? What else? Because when you ask them, like, all right, so what are you going to do about it? They'll probably give you 2 or 3 answers that are kind of the safe answers, probably the ones they've already thought about but maybe haven't acted on. But when you ask what else and it's followed by silence, that's when you're getting to that sweet spot where they haven't been before, or they've been scared to go before, or they haven't felt like they had the permission to go before. And so I usually get to that quiet, and then I ask it again. And usually then you have maybe 3 to 5 different things that they've listed. And 1 or 2 of those, their voice changed a little bit. What I could do is this, or, oh, I guess I could do that, or should do that. Like, those are not the ones that they should be doing. But like when the music in their voice changes, when the energy changes, that's where they want to go. And saying like, all right, so which of these would you like to do? And what would that look like if you were to do it? And so what's our way forward? How confident are you that we're going to do that? And then my favorite sort of ending question is, what are we going to do to make that happen? Because a lot of times you're like, all right, so I'm going to do this. And you're like, well, that sounds good, but that's like a lot of work. Like if you were just going to do that, we wouldn't be talking about this. So what do we need to do to make that happen? What's that first step? And this is actually, I could teach you all these different models of coaching, but this is how so many of my conversations end up being framed, is like, if this were a 10 out of 10, if this went perfectly, if you knocked it out of the park, if you crushed it, what would that look like? And then, all right, so that's where we're headed. What's our first step forward? And so not thinking about like all these things I have to do, but like, where's our activation energy? How do we get going? And so when you layer this all together, and I'll probably stop here so we can ask a few questions. If you layer this all together, basically using the coach approach, you hear someone talking about something. They have a goal or a stressor or a challenge, something that they're trying to think about. And you're listening to that, you hear that, and you reflect, and then you listen. And then you reflect some more, and you listen. You get all those materials that you need to move forward out on the table. And then you ask a powerful how or what question. And then you listen, and you reflect, and you listen. Maybe ask another one. And together you move towards that to try to help them figure out their way forward based on where they are, as defined by them, to where they want to be. So I'm going to just wrap up with just a few ideas of how you could start to practice this. One is to just acknowledge that we burrow when we're busy and try not to burrow. Start sharing your own positive stories and asking people for theirs, and really listening when they do so. Trying to practice your listening, paying attention when people rob you of that and interrupt you, and try to create a different environment. Try to be quiet after you reflect and not just jump right to asking a question. Thinking about this grow model or this grow approach to when you're working on something that's not working, stopping and saying like, what would this really look like if this were working, if I achieved this? Because you can self-coach your way through a lot of these things. Trying to ask your questions, what and how questions, and pointing that curiosity outward, recognizing that a lot of the questions we ask in conversations are actually about ourselves and not as much about other people. And that when you do these things with other people, what you really do is you form these connections that are really meaningful, and they can be quick. They can be brief. And thinking about when your tank is empty, we'll talk a little bit about the tank in the plenary, thinking about how can I refill it by just going and connecting with somebody else. And no matter what type of personality you have, basic human connections fill us all up in some way. It's just figuring out the way that does it the most for you. So I'll pause there and answer any questions that you guys might have, and we'll dive deeper into some of the stuff in the plenary. I do. Yeah. Like 10 minutes. You guys want to do it? Okay, so the good news is you've already done some of the work for it. So the idea, so you all just shared a goal or a challenge that you're working on. And so what we can do is we can use that as the framework for this. So whatever you just shared with your person, you all want to help them fix it. Now you can. And so you can use that for the platform of what we talk about here. So as the coach, you're going to ask them, so what would this look like if this were going really well? Where are you now? You probably heard a little bit about that, but they might want to talk about that. So what's their reality? What are their options to move forward? And of those options, which are the ones that they think they want to do? And so we'll do like 5 minutes each, which is tight. But hopefully you start to feel what this looks like, and it gives you a chance to practice that last bit of asking those what and the how questions. Any questions about that? So I'll keep the timer, and then I'll let you know when it's time to switch. Okay, so you already know the frame of what they're talking about. What would that look like if that were going really well? Where are we now? What are your options to move forward? And which of those do you want to do? Okay? All right.